The evening hummed with the low buzz of conversation and the clatter of dishes. The restaurant was alive, but it felt hollow. The usual bustle, the fryers crackling, the sizzle of oil and chatter, all played out like a routine. But for Julian Merritt, the CEO of the restaurant chain, it felt foreign. He stepped into the room quietly, unnoticed. No blazer. No tie. Just a simple gray hoodie, jeans blending in. No one knew who he was. No one was meant to know. His eyes scanned the room slowly, observing the staff. There was a sense of heaviness hanging in the air. He could feel it, tension sharp and palpable. A manager stood at the bar, arms crossed, scanning the room like a watchful predator. Julian could feel the power shift, the distance between those behind the counter and those in front of it, the difference in how they moved and how they carried themselves. The hostess didn't look up as she guided him to a booth, her eyes tired, as though this routine was something she could barely survive. The same exhaustion he saw in the rest of the staff, their faces drawn and tired, their smiles hollow. The food, the aromas of fried catfish, fried green tomatoes, hush puppies, filled the air, but all Julian could smell was a distant, aching desperation. There was no joy in it, only movement. "Everything all right, sir?" came the voice of Deshawn, a young server. His grin didn't reach his eyes. Julian met his gaze, his voice measured, controlled. "It's fine. Just watching." Deshawn's smile faltered, the weight of the night on his face. He nodded and moved on, disappearing into the kitchen. Julian's gaze returned to the room, watching. He noticed everything, the busboy fumbling with trays, the waitress rushing past in worn shoes. The manager, Brent, was still standing at the bar, watching over everything with an arrogance that made Julian's stomach churn. Something was off. This wasn't what he had built. This wasn't the vision he'd had for his restaurants. A sound, faint but clear, broke through the noise of the room. A soft sob. Julian froze, every muscle in his body tensing. He listened, trying to locate the source of the sound. It was coming from the back, near the break room. His eyes narrowed. The sound pulled at him, tugged at something inside. He stood up slowly, slipping away from the table. The restaurant's noise faded behind him as he walked toward the hallway. The sobs were growing louder, more distinct. He couldn't ignore it. Julian's footsteps echoed faintly in the narrow hallway as he walked toward the break room. Each step was deliberate, yet it felt like he was moving in slow motion, as if his feet were dragging through the weight of the silence around him. The noise of the restaurant, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the chatter of customers, faded as he neared the back. Here the air felt different. He could feel it on his skin, this thick, oppressive tension. He had built this company on respect, on family. But the walls of this place, once a symbol of that dream, now seemed to be closing in on him. It wasn't the first time he'd heard rumors, but something about tonight felt different. The sound of those muffled sobs? That was different. It was as if the restaurant had become a prison, and somewhere inside these walls, the employees were suffocating. A phone call echoed in his mind, a conversation with Lynn, his assistant. "The staff has been complaining about Brent again. You should look into it." He had brushed her off, then dismissed it. He didn't want to believe that someone he trusted could betray the values he had worked so hard to instill in the business. But now, standing in this hallway, he knew better. The complaints, the whispers, the stories, he had ignored them. And now they had led him here to this moment. He stopped just before the break room door, his breath catching in his throat. He heard it more clearly now, the sound of someone crying. Soft, muffled, broken. It was so quiet, but it felt louder than anything else in the room. He took a slow breath and peered through the small crack in the door. Inside, Ariel sat hunched over, her shoulders shaking with each sob. Tears streamed down her face, each one a silent testament to her pain. Tasha, a stocky kitchen worker, sat beside her. Her voice was low, comforting, though Julian could see the frustration, the anger in her eyes. Tasha's words came out softly, but there was no mistaking the authority in them. "He's just a bully. He can't do this to you. You don't deserve this." Ariel's voice trembled, breaking the silence. "I can't take it anymore. I just want to work in peace. But he keeps making everything worse." Julian's chest tightened. He knew this story. He'd seen it before in other places, in other lives. But this time it hit differently. Seeing Ariel like this, hearing her words, was like watching the final unraveling of everything he had built. She wasn't just a waitress to him, she was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. His fingers tightened into fists at his sides as he stepped back, away from the door. The weight of it all crashed down on him, harder than he expected. This wasn't just about one woman, one restaurant. It was bigger. It was systemic. The rot had been creeping in for years and he had let it happen. The very thing he had built, a place that was supposed to be different, a sanctuary of respect and dignity, had become just another machine grinding people down. He stood there for a moment, his back against the wall, the anger rising in his chest. The tears he had just heard weren't just Ariel's. They were every voice, every complaint, every silent cry that had been ignored. And it was his fault. He had turned a blind eye. When he stepped back toward the door, his voice was quiet, measured. But inside it roared. The weight of the decisions he had avoided, the responsibility he had neglected, finally hit him. The system he had created wasn't working anymore. It never had. He had let power corrupt what was supposed to be a place of healing, a place of dignity. And now it was time to fix it. Julian stood at the bar, leaning against the polished wood, watching the chaos of the restaurant unfold around him. The noise of clinking glasses, the chatter of customers, the hum of the fryers, it all felt distant. His mind wasn't here. His mind was on the conversation he'd overheard, the pain he had seen. Ariel's tear-streaked face, Tasha's quiet anger. It was a familiar feeling, the crushing weight of knowing that something was wrong but not knowing how to fix it. The company he had built was crumbling from the inside. The culture he had fought so hard for had been corrupted by one man. And now Julian had to make a choice. He exhaled slowly and turned his gaze toward the manager's office at the far end of the room. Brent. The embodiment of everything that was wrong with the system. Julian knew what had to happen next. He pushed himself off the bar and walked toward the office. He didn't need to be dramatic. No grand speech, no fiery confrontation. It was simple. The truth was enough. Brent stood there, arms crossed as always. His posture was stiff, his expression dismissive. He didn't even look at Julian as he walked in, too busy rearranging the paperwork on his desk. Julian didn't wait for an invitation. Brent? His voice was calm, controlled, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Brent turned slowly, an eyebrow raised. About what? The words came easily, but they still carried the weight of everything that had built up to this moment. You're done. Brent blinked, his jaw tightening. He tried to laugh it off, a hollow sound. What, you think you can just waltz in here and… Julian didn't flinch, didn't give an inch. Yes, I can. His voice was quiet, steady. There was no anger in it, just certainty. Brent's face faltered for a split second, but then the arrogance returned. He sneered, scoffing as he stood up. You think you're some big hero, huh? You don't know what it's like to keep this place running. You can't just… I'm not here to argue, Julian interrupted. His tone never changed. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to escalate it. Pack your things and go. Brent's mouth opened as if he were going to say something else, but the words never came. He stood there for a moment, eyes flashing with anger, but all that came out was a weak, this is ridiculous. Without another word, Julian turned his back to him and walked toward the door. He didn't need to hear Brent's excuses, didn't need to listen to the defense of the system that had been rotting from the inside. He knew what was broken. It had taken him too long to see it, but he knew now. As Brent stormed out, Julian felt it. The first real breath he had taken all night. A moment of relief. The weight lifting just a little. But that relief was fleeting. Julian's mind raced as the adrenaline ebbed. The staff, his people. They were looking to him for guidance, for leadership. And he knew that this couldn't end with Brent. He was just one part of the problem. Julian stood still for a moment, listening to the sound of footsteps retreating. But as the noise of the restaurant swirled around him again, he knew that something had to change. Something deeper than just firing one person. The system was broken. The culture was broken. And he couldn't keep pretending he didn't know. It was time for real change. He didn't know exactly how he was going to fix it, but he knew he had to start somewhere. The hard part was just beginning. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds in the small office at the back of the restaurant. Julian sat alone at the worn desk, his hands on the edge, eyes distant, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on him. The meetings, the reports, the apologies, everything blurred together. He'd spent hours going through every complaint, every accusation. They all felt like echoes now, but they had come with a purpose. His phone buzzed on the desk and he glanced at it. A message from his daughter. It had been days since they last spoke. Can we talk? Miss you, Dad. The words were simple, but they hit harder than any report. Julian let the phone rest in his hand for a moment, staring at the screen as if it held the answers to something bigger than just family. He'd let his work consume him, pulled him away from what truly mattered. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, letting the silence of the room envelop him. For the first time in a long time, He wasn't sure if he was just a man running a business or someone trying to fix something broken. The staff, his employees, had trusted him with more than just their work. They had trusted him to make things right. His phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call. Deshawn. Hey Deshawn, Julian answered, his voice steady but with an edge of weariness. Hey Mr. Merritt, it's me. Just wanted to check in. Everything's calm now. But, people don't think it'll actually change. You know. Julian's grip tightened on the phone, but he didn't flinch. I know, he said quietly. That's why I'm here. There was a long pause on the other end. Julian could feel the weight of the unspoken truth, the doubt lingering in the silence. Deshawn didn't say anything at first, but Julian knew what he was thinking. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for everyone. The ones who had kept quiet, the ones who still feared that speaking up would cost them more than they were willing to lose. You really think it'll be different? Deshawn asked, his voice low. I have to believe it will, Julian replied, his voice firm but quiet. There was a soft, almost inaudible sigh from Deshawn before he spoke again. I hope you're right. Julian leaned back in his chair, staring out the small window that overlooked the parking lot. The street lights were flickering on one by one, and for a moment he felt the weight of everything settle around him like a thick fog. The press had already started to pick up on the changes. Social media was buzzing with whispers about the CEO who had walked into his own restaurant like any other customer, who'd stepped in when it mattered most. He had taken control. But now the real work had to begin. The next morning, Julian stood in the corner of the restaurant as the staff moved around him, cleaning, setting up for the day. There was no fanfare, no big announcement. Just the soft hum of a place slowly coming back to life. Julian watched as Ariel passed by, nodding to him as she adjusted the menus on the hostess stand. She didn't say anything, but there was a quiet shift in the way she held herself, in the way she walked with more purpose. Deshawn approached him quietly, holding a tray of silverware. You know, he said, glancing around, the way people are looking at me now, it's different. It's like they're seeing me for the first time. Julian nodded, his gaze steady. They're not the only ones. The small but significant shift in the room wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about the culture. The change wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be immediate. But it had begun. One person at a time. Julian's phone buzzed again and he looked down at the message from his daughter. Can we talk? Miss you, Dad. He sat there for a moment, unsure if he was ready to answer. He had spent so long trying to fix everything, trying to make things right at the restaurant, that he had lost sight of what mattered most. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind, a lesson from long ago. A leader isn't just someone who leads. A leader is someone who listens. Julian set the phone down, a quiet sigh escaping his lips. He stood, walking toward the door of the office. He wasn't just fixing a restaurant. He was fixing the foundation of what he had built. And it had to start with listening. The restaurant wasn't perfect, but for the first time, Julian felt like he was part of something bigger than just business. As he walked through the dining room, he could see the employees working together, without fear, without the heavy weight of being watched by someone who didn't care. They were still cautious, still unsure if the changes would stick, but Julian saw something else in them now. Oh, quiet but there. He stepped out into the bright, fading sunlight. The world was moving around him, but for the first time, it felt like he was part of the change. And that was enough.